Think of the old iceberg graphic, right? What that project you're doing is what's above the waterline. Everyone sees it and everything, but a lot of the work to get that data ready is below the waterline. That's that giant chunk of ice below the waterline that still needs to happen.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next episode of the Tech Tea Podcast by McLean Forrester. We're here to help make technology understandable and bring to you the latest news on emerging technology. So, as usual, we normally start with our little segment called What's the Tea, where we just talk about some of the latest advancements. What do you have? What have you found for us, Larry?
All right. So this last week, ChatGPT, OpenAI, as everyone knows it as ChatGPT, they have released ChatGPT Pro. So it is a new $200 a month service that uses more compute, brings more accurate answers, and is advertised to be more reliable. In their comparison, go ahead.
$200 a month. Holy moly.
Yeah.
This better be freaking good.
So in their comparison, they show a graphical representation on the announcement, how it performs against their own previous three versions, which is the -01 preview, 01 itself, and now they have a 01 Pro. And in their reflection of the graphic, it shows that it performs better. My assumption is, and it even takes a little bit longer to process because it uses so much more compute. When you bring it up, it actually has a progress bar that shows you, hey, I'm still thinking about it. I'm going to give you an answer in a minute. So apparently that's the consumption of cycles on that one.
I mean, that's awesome for if you're doing some things that need some deeper thinking, right? Like maybe scientific, research, or I can think of a number of use cases there, but like, do you think the common sort of everyday people like us, do you think people are really going to pay that much? Or is that maybe this is really not designed for people for everyday use?
I wouldn't think so. Not at $200 a month, but at the same time, I think you're kind of hitting the point there, which is how much are you willing to pay for good answers that you have to spend some of your time on versus maybe great answers, if that's the difference, great answers that you have to spend less time on, because any kind of output out of an AI capability, you want to have that human oversight just to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing and what you intend for it to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll keep an eye on it. I'd love to hear from some of our listeners about their experiences if they've taken the plunge and tried the $200 a month features. We'll see. Yeah. I mean, we'll just probably stay on our $20 a month plan for now.
All right. Yeah, I think so too. You ready to roll into today's topic?
Yeah, this is a good one. I know that this is another one near and dear to you because we're going to talk a little bit about data today, but not just data, right? Like, is your data ready for AI? And I know we've talked about this and posted about this because I think this is something that people may not think about when they dive headfirst into maybe an AI project. So let's talk a little bit about what does that even mean? Like, data is ready. What does that mean?
So I'm seeing a trend here. Each week you say, I know this one's near and dear to you. I'm such a geek, aren't I? I love this stuff. I love emerging tech, and I love deep diving into. Let me understand this. I mean,
specifically data is definitely your bailiwick. You've got certifications in data management, and you teach this stuff at WashU. So I think that makes you the resident expert, and I just get to listen and ask all the hard questions.
That's too much pressure.
You do well. So
all right. So today's topic is about data. Love data. Data makes everything work, especially today. So is your data ready for AI? That seems kind of daunting. So there's a lot of hype around AI. We're talking about it almost every week, right? We're excited but there's some critical factors to making your AI project a success, right? And it all goes back to your data. The data, any AI capability, any automation, 90% of the time or greater, it's going to be fed by some level of data from your system, from your enterprise, from your sources. How good's the data? Garbage in, garbage out, as they always say.
So are you talking about getting access to data or maybe how data is organized? Let's get more specific here.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of those things, right? So there's so much more to it. You want to ensure that, those standard data attributes? Is it available when you need it, right? Is it trusted? Can I trust this data, which has a lot of different facets to it? Is it relevant? Are my answers that I'm providing actually related to the question you're asking? And how timely is that information, right? There's a lot of attributes to data. So you're responsible. Let me take it to a more tangible thing. You're responsible for a lot of software delivery projects, right? So, and you relied upon good and available data for that software that you're developing to work properly. And software delivery data requirements, the data requirements required for software to work properly is exactly like that current AI-based project, right? I need this data to make this thing work. So do you have any examples maybe that people would be interested in that you've experienced?
I mean, I can share a lot of data gone wrong, maybe anecdotes. So, like you said, I built a lot of projects for name brands, companies and, global banks, national retailers, national food chains. And, I see a lot of common challenges around data, right? And so access is a good one, right? So you'll be working on something with a customer and you'll say, okay, now we're ready for this piece. And hopefully you've already talked about the fact that you have a dependency on getting this information. And a lot of times the data is not ready when you need it. So that can slow you down. Sometimes some of the things we've run into is when you start talking about data that you're going to consume, you will have conversations around what is that going to look like. And you sometimes we call it a contract where you say, this is what we need. And they say, this is what we're going to give you. And you have a little contract around that. And then when it comes time to actually get access to that data, that API, whatever, it's not always in the contract form. And so this can really slow you down as well. It can take you sort of off course as you then have to work backwards a little bit to make changes, to get them to make changes to it, or just what you've already built. So you've already built to the specification and you might have to go back in and change that because it's easier than the client changing the data and how they're getting it on their end. So that's another thing that you can run into. And so, yeah, I'd say that these are probably some of the more challenging aspects of building software or dealing with data, good data, even test data. If you don't have good test data, it's going to make it even harder to get a good quality product into production.
That's a great perspective. There's a lot to unpack there, right? Because it comes back to, okay, well, the API, we'll just stay with that. So, okay, I'm supposed to be able to get the data from this API. Maybe they don't have an ecosystem that has their data available in APIs, right? Amazon realized this way back in the 2003, 2004 timeframe. There was a memo that went out basically said, we will make all of our data available through APIs.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack there. So maybe an organization doesn't have that yet. Maybe they're not there.
Right.
And the data that is offered through the API is the right data. Is it accurate? Is it quality? Is it, there's so much to unpack of just even having access to it. Is it good data? Is it last year's data?
Right. What we ran into when I worked with the government a lot in logistics and supply chain, you'd run into a scenario where you've got the same types of data being called different things.
Yes.
And just sorting through that, because who changes in that scenario? And how do you sort through all that? That could take you years. And we've seen it take years for some organizations. So that's also a huge challenge.
Everything you say, my gears start turning because there's so much to unpack to that. You're absolutely right. So what you just described, data in one system, data in another, and they appear to be the same data, but called something different. That's a lack of governance. That's a lack of standards. There's so much that can go wrong in the data world if you're not moving forward to say, I'm anticipating this need in the future. So therefore I need to do that's that old phrase, the blocking and tackling today to create my foundation. I need to ensure that I have data governance in place. I need to make sure that I've defined data standards, that I have a data architecture, that I have all of these things so that I can support some sort of project in the future. I mean, that's just, even if you have no project coming, that's just the goodness of becoming efficient and effective in the sharing of data across your enterprise.
Right. So if you're an organization and you want to dive into an AI project, how do you know if your data is ready? What are the things you could look at, or what are the things we would help them look at?
Yeah, I mean, so we need to see where, kind of leadership is investing. Leadership is investing in these AI projects and they're expecting goodness. And just like in your software delivery projects, there was an investment. People are waiting. They're excited to see this new thing that you're building, whether, again, it comes back to software, AI, you name it. There's a corporate investment and everyone's watching. And if the foundation isn't there, that's trouble brewing, and it can end up in disaster. So I like the scenario that you provided, but from a data management perspective to support an AI project, there's actually a lot to dive into across the board. We've touched on some. So the data itself, is it good data? But then take it to the next level. I want descriptions of the data. So data about data is metadata. If I have data that's 6 months old, how do I know that it's 6 months old? Well, that would be captured in the metadata. How do I know if it's been changed? That's captured in the metadata. And especially when you start to get to areas of semi-structured and unstructured data. A picture of a bird, I always use this example. If the file name is 15.jpg, what is it? Right? You have no clue. But if you look at the metadata associated with a photo, especially like in even modern cameras, even on your smartphone, it captures a ton of metadata, exactly where you took it, what was the geolocation, what was the date, all of that stuff. That's metadata. That's always important, because as you're trying to understand the data to see whether you can use it or not, whether it's timely and all of those other attributes we talked about, that's where the information comes from. And then the data platform. If the organization, if the enterprise hasn't invested in a data platform of any type, how do you share the data? You don't want a million system-to-system interfaces. That is very costly. That's increased tech debt, and that doesn't get you after master data. Now, master data is that data that's shared, it's uniform and shared, it's very common across the enterprise. You want to identify those candidates. Typical data entities are products, customers. Think of Amazon. I love how Amazon does things. Your customer data set. I can log into AWS. I can log into the Amazon website. I can log into Kindle. I use the same login because my customer data is standardized and it's available as master data. Any of these resonating with you so far?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind as you go through these, if I'm an organization wanting to start an AI project, how do I know if I'm ready? Like, do I go down this list and say, oh, I have this, I have this, I have this? Well, how do I know if I don't want to get into it and then find out?
Well, you're right. I mean, some of it is the basic blocking and tackling. If you know that the advanced capabilities you're going to be bringing are going to rely upon APIs, then do that, decomposition. Do I have an ability to create data and share it through APIs? But then it comes back to really the decomposition of the project itself, just like you did with software. What data specifically for this project, for this effort, what data am I going to use? And so then I look at, can I get quality data? Do I have a means to measure it? Do I have a means to provide it and receive it and share it? And through that decomposition of what data do I need, that's going to start giving you your playbook for, okay, now where do I need to put my efforts? If you've already invested in some of those platforms, you can share API, you can share data through APIs. You do have a platform, you do have a data catalog, et cetera. You have all these things, but maybe you don't have the exact right data for this project, whether it's software development or whether it's an AI capability. That's where this phraseology of, is your data ready for AI, gets a little tricky. Do I have to have it all in place before I start? No.
No, it's a dependency though, right?
Exactly.
At that point, you're going to need that data.
Right.
To that point in your projects. I suppose you'd want that pre-work to be done before you get to that point in your project. Otherwise, you're going to be slowing things down.
That's exactly it. I mean, you've done those software projects many, many times over. So in your project plan, at some juncture, you're calling for that to be ready.
Right.
And ideally in the data world, you say, well, I'm at least two thirds of the way there. I can finish that last third by the time Heather gets to this point.
Right. So that's really no different, I think, than all the projects I've ever worked before. Just sticking to those timelines and truly understanding what's required by a certain time, that's going to be the key. So kind of comes back to planning a little bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Think of the old iceberg graphic, right? What that project you're doing is what's above the waterline. Everyone sees it and everything, but a lot of the work to get that data ready is below the waterline. That's that giant chunk of ice below the waterline that still needs to happen.
Right. Right.
So I like it. Is your data ready for AI is a key aspect. There are lots of things to look at before you jump into an AI project. And the challenge right now for leaders is they may not have all of this stuff in place, but they're getting a high demand from social networking, from your peer groups, from other organizations, or your competitors to say, hey, move out. We need to move out on this AI thing.
Right. And I think that's a place where we can help, right? If I need to do this, I'm not quite sure what are all the steps, and I'm not quite sure about all the technology. That's where we come in, right? That's where we have expertise in building these kinds of capabilities. We've done the research. We know all about the different tools that can be leveraged here. And so we would start that conversation by just talking about the goal and talking about what are those high level requirements, the high level functionality we're looking for, and then just breaking that down. And then we get to that, finally you get to that, okay, now what data do we need to make this happen piece? And yeah, that's quite a bit of work, right? But we have great ways of getting to that place. We have techniques that have been tried and true and have worked in the past with many, many clients. So I'm confident that we can guide any client through that sort of discovery and decision making.
And you're pointing out some really good things that none of this is new in some ways. I mean, when I worked in data previously, that was kind of the phraseology was data scientists have been around for quite a while, right? And the problem was data scientists work, they would do 80% wrangling of data, 20% doing actual data science work. You went into an organization that had a mature data-oriented perspective that kind of flipped the model a little bit, and data scientists only had to do 20% of wrangling of data because it was far more governed and there were processes in place and high maturity, and 80% of their time was spent doing data science. It's kind of what we're looking to help with. And you really want a team that understands data, that understands AI, that understands IT, and understands even business process reengineering and things like that, because it's going to be a game changer.
Right. And that's a really good point. I mean, not only can we build those AI capabilities, leveraging all that data, but we have expertise in building data strategies, helping you walk through how to mature your data governance processes. And so I think if you're looking to get a handle on those things, we can also help in that area. And those are fun projects too. I enjoy it.
Yeah. It's a holistic approach. Absolutely. And that's, well, the whole point of today's episode, I think, was we wanted people to understand that there's more than just saying, hey, go get this latest AI widget and make that thing happen. It's not quite that easy. You have to have a wider perspective and a greater understanding.
Right. It's not that easy, but also it's not rocket science. Like, this is Heather's life lessons. The one thing I've learned throughout life is nothing's really, rocket science. Okay, besides rocket science, but most concepts can be rolled up into something that you can understand and digest and make sense of yourself without being a rocket scientist or a brain. So, and you know what? That makes me feel good, because that means I can learn these things too.
You just made a bunch of rocket scientists and brain surgeons.
Sorry, guys.
Is that right?
they are pretty great, but yeah. I do think that a lot of these concepts are not above, regular people learning them and understanding them. So,
and we've experienced some CIOs and some kind of C-suite people that are just a little intimidated by the whole AI wave right now. And you're absolutely right. Let's just have a conversation, because we can kind of break it down to say, all right, we understand all the pieces and parts that go together. We've done IKEA furniture before, so it's.
Yeah, once you build one coffee table, you can kind of probably build more.
People are going to be shouting at us now. It's like, wait a minute, you're saying putting an AI model into practice is just like an IKEA. Well, not quite.
Not really, you know,
You get the idea.
sort of building some of the instructions as you go, you know,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
some of these things. So,
Yeah. So,
okay. Well,
I mean,
anything else you want to mention on this topic?
data. I just speak data, and it's a warm fuzzy because honestly, that's what's driving the world right now. That's the root. That's the foundation of everything that you see happening. We're even Chat GPT, when that first came out, what is that? 20 years worth of internet data,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's where it's coming from. Storage is cheap in comparison. Processing is cheap in comparison to years past. It's time to process our data.
Okay. Well, folks, you heard it straight from Larry. If this is something you want to talk about a little bit more, we'd love to chat. No obligation. We just love to sit down and meet new people and talk.
Let's geek out.
And what?
Let's geek out.
Let's geek out. I'll let you geek out with Larry, and I'll listen intently, and we'll just tell some good stories along the way. All right.
We've got the lumps to prove it all. I mean, experience is making that mistake before. So
right. And oh my gosh, we've got a lot of those chalked up. So, you know, just from 20 years of building technology here. So,
yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Do appreciate it. Visit our website, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll see you next time on the Tech Tea Podcast.
All right. Bye-bye.
Later. Bye.